Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
This is Ed Cohen in San Diego, and you're on Global TV Talk Show. And this is about striving and thriving and surviving all this pandemic BS that's going on, impacting so many people around the world. So our special guest today is Stephen Howard in Mexico City, although it doesn't look it. And Jennifer Moss in Waterloo, Canada. Welcome, Stephen. And
Thank you. Thank you. This is our Thrive Excel show. This is where we want to talk about how we invite guests in to talk about how leaders can help employees thrive in the workplace wellness, and particularly the topic of the month right now has got to be burnout. And so Jennifer's written a book called the Burnout Epidemic. So welcome, Jennifer. Can you tell us a bit about your background and a bit about the book as well, please?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm envious of your nice, warm background right now. So my, background really started in journalism, and then worked in communications for a large HR firm. But it was a personal sort of moment where my husband, who was a pro athlete, actually became acutely paralyzed. And we were in the hospital. He's okay now, so just, don't worry about that. But it was in that moment where we realized, the importance of psychological fitness. And that was our focus. We started a company that really was looking at happiness, and the fact that we spend so much time, 50% of our waking hours at work, and it was so depleting that for a lot of people that we wanted to address that. And sort of flash forward to now, looking at the fact that we are so chronically stressed and it's getting worse. I started writing the book before the pandemic. And a lot of what we were trying to do was tell people to just do more yoga, or, take this meditation app and listen to rain for 30 seconds, or, the wellness strategies were just so far downstream that no one was really getting help. And that became kind of my mission, is how do we work at looking at upstream interventions that are going to change, the dynamic.
Why don't you hold your book to the camera? Let everybody see it.
Is it backwards?
No, it's perfect.
Oh, good.
The burnout epidemic. Okay, so is there a vaccine?
Yeah, I wish there was. In the book, it's interesting because everyone's looking for a silver bullet, right? Even when we were starting out with the earlier technology, and the company was really focused on how do we solve for this unhappiness thing, and how do we make people happier? And it's just a bunch of tiny little micro steps that have to happen with us as individuals, but then it's also a massive societal infrastructure policy kind of revamp or overhaul that has to happen. And it has to be kind of battling legacy and a lot of things that have taken us to this point. So it is a really complex problem to solve, and it's going to take a lot of work. But I think one of the things that happened out of the pandemic was that it did draw, some attention to the fact that people are done. They're ready to quit if there isn't a solution or some sort of effort to solve for it in place. They're going to be just gone.
So this is a silent movement, personal, and it's not displayed to the boss. It just happens.
I think there are some folks that are not helping it and probably still pushing the problem even deeper and harder. And I think we saw that in the pandemic, where it was like, we're in the middle of a global pandemic and we still see leaders, pursuing stretch goals, and we have a high growth mentality, and we're not really understanding that this is a unique time in the world. And so that lack of response created a lot of just anger and frustration and disillusionment for employees, which has now put a little bit of power in their hands, and they are asking for more, which is a good thing. And some employers are responding and they're, better about it, but we're still seeing a lot of people putting lip service to the problem and not really doing much about it.
So your experience with HBS, that's Harvard Business School, right?
Yeah, Harvard Business Review Press published the book, and then I write for HBR, Harvard Business Review.
Right. I'm from Boston, so I'm very familiar with Harvard. I have family. I didn't go. I wasn't smart enough, but I have family that went. So Stephen, you see this burnout thing everywhere, right?
I see it everywhere. I see it at all levels of the organization, and I often quote a survey that Vizier, a company, researched 1,000 people last year, and what was it? 70% said that they would leave their organization for another organization that actually provided them with resources to battle burnout, to battle the feeling of burnout. But I want to go back to Alita, add on to what you asked, Ed, for Jennifer, I saw research that Gallup said like 43% of women are uncomfortable talking about burnout with their immediate supervisor, and even 30% of men are uncomfortable. It didn't matter whether their boss was the same gender or a different gender as yourself, but 30% to 42% of people are uncomfortable talking about burnout. Why is that, and what can we do to fix that? That's a systemic problem, I would suggest.
It's a huge problem, and I appreciate that stat because we've been studying just the impact on gender too. And this last year, we had a disproportionate impact on women burning out. And a lot of that is that societal reason that they're just the primary caregivers, and they were working 15 to 20 hours of extra unpaid labor a week. And yet they still felt like if they talked about that or complained about it or mentioned it, that would seem that they're not strong enough or they're not capable enough. There's all these, really invisible pressures that are placed on different groups for various reasons. And that plays into why women just left, why we're at 1988 labor force participation in the US right now, because female labor force participation in the US, because instead they're just saying, I'm done. And employers that don't, or leaders that don't say, let's talk about this, are just going to lose a lot of people because they need to make it more open. And you look at that global Microsoft survey where they looked at 30,000 people across the globe, and 41% said they're planning to quit their job in 3 months, and only 4% said it was pay. It was all based on how they were treated, how they were able to talk about their mental health or burnout inside their organizations, how their employers treated their, potential risk of burnout. So it's really just a massive problem that's impacting, demographics in different ways, but basically everyone's still feeling like they can't talk to their boss about it. And so instead they're going to just quit.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, no, they can't, but also the leaders I talk to, they're not comfortable having these conversations. And they say, look, I've never been trained. I don't know how to talk. I don't know what to ask. I don't know what, HR hasn't given me any guidance here. So where do people go for, and I don't think it's an HR issue personally. So where do people go for guidance as a leader to be able to have these kind of conversations?
I do agree too, that it is with direct managers and direct report. The relationship there is really fundamental to solving for it, because you can have a program, but it needs to be nuanced, really, that conversation that happens between a boss and their team. And one of the things I keep saying to leaders, because I do empathize, it's, you're expected to be a mental health professional and deal with someone that might be in crisis. And that's really not something that they're prepared for. And so what I keep saying is, just let your team know that you aren't a mental health professional, but where stuff is in the organization to access. Go and talk to HR and just ask in their EAP, what are the benefits? Do they have any, mental health supports? Do they do anything actively in the community? What is available to their people? And then even do a little bit further digging if you're a manager and look at what the local supports are. Is someone dealing with the LGBTQ plus issue? Is it someone that's dealing as a minority with something? Is it a single mom dealing with something? What are the local supports too? And then managers can just be the conduit. They don't have to be the professional, but they can be a conduit. And that makes them more comfortable in having those conversations, because the expectation to solve the problem isn't within them to have to solve.
One of our advertisers on our holding group, globalbusinessnews.net, is a company called BetterHelp.com, which is telehealth, and they're all shrinks. Okay, so and then it's very inexpensive. Then they have millions of call-ins, and supposedly it remains confidential. So have you heard of that or something like it?
Yeah, Talkspace and Better Up and all of those types of tools are actually, something that I think are really great shifts that have been made. So we have Calm apps and some of these other technologies that push the burnout prevention piece or the mental health responsibility on the individual to solve, versus where you have mental health supports that are built in, that's more upstream, that's dealing with the real issues, and it's creating an anonymous way to have a conversation about mental health. And I actually do think that the opportunity to talk to a therapist, especially because we've adopted telehealth like in no other time in history, teletherapy and telehealth is like, if we had tried to do this 3 years ago, people would have not adopted it at this level, but this is just such a different comfort level that we have. So I think those types of supports where it's, on-demand therapy and having the ability to just communicate with your therapist is a good practice. And I know a lot of these types of supports, if you're an individual that has to pay for that by yourself, it's about $450 US a month or $400 a month. It's expensive. So having that as part of an employer benefit is a huge help. And you can have, basically like on-time conversations, real-time conversations. You can email, you can text your therapist. And the more we're comfortable with that, I think that's more of an upstream solution versus a downstream tactic, which is some of these other, optimization wellness.
Yeah. So coming up next week on Feb 4, we're producing a conference, teleconference, global, called Global Talent 360. Which is about the new realities, exactly what you're talking about. We have psychologists, we have people like Stephen Howard speaking, and we have some corporate people from different countries, and so it is red hot, major topic. So congrats on your timing, Steve.
Yeah.
I wasn't hoping that a pandemic would be the surefire boost to my career, but I'm not going to not appreciate that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden people are talking about burnout. It's been something I've been hoping, more people would talk about. So.
Right. This is it. Time is everything. Timing. And so get a grip. Hang on.
That's right.
I did a lot of research for one of my most recent books about how stress and anxiety impacts decision making. And I noticed the subtitle of your book talks about chronic stress and how to fix it. So how do we fix chronic stress?
Like I said, it is a lot of different pieces of the puzzle that have to support it. I mean, you can do all the work on your own self-care and psychological fitness training and improve your social emotional intelligence. But if you go into work and you still have to work 70 hours a week, or you're facing systemic discrimination, or you continue to deal with the fact that you're getting work dumped on you as a surprise, you have no agency, these are all the things that you don't necessarily have control over. So it needs to be both, a we problem to solve where organizations and folks are doing their work. But we do have personalities that are more prone to burnout. Perfectionists tend to be more prone to burnout. That type A, solutions focused, production focused environments where we don't let ourselves off the hook if we don't hit those objectives, if we don't know when to turn off, if we're constantly, driving for results, we can end up putting ourselves in a high level burnout. And I think what's happening right now is those two, sort of the recipe for the burnout society right now is just all culminating. And I also think too, right now, I mean, there's a pandemic and we're in a very unique environment at work right now with the pandemic just constantly there. And so I think that we need to just accept the reality that this is what it is for a bit and then try to adjust to what our current situation is a bit more.
One thing I've noticed is that the people I coach are more willing to talk about burnout, particularly at a younger age. I mean, I remember when I started working, I worked 40 hours, 50 hours, 60-hour weeks, just out of college. And most people, out of college tend to do that. And of course, we saw the Wall Street company earlier this year where people started complaining because they're working 100-hour weeks, which is just crazy. But do you see burnout now affecting almost all generations, almost all age groups? And is that different than in the past, or has it always been like this? We just didn't know.
I've seen this as a legacy in certain industries, definitely for a long time, in consulting and finance and in law and in healthcare for sure, and teaching. There's certain industries that are really prone to it. And the legacy for sure in healthcare is the worst, and tech for sure. But the driving of hours and unsustainable workload has been a big problem. So yeah, I've seen it. And so that obviously goes across lots of demographics, ages, genders. But I know right now, from all the research and the data, that our youngest group is actually the most burned out. And what happens as you start to get more further into your career, you have a bit of you have the ability to have more agency, you have more tenure, you have a little bit more protection around your job. Typically, you have a different upbringing and how, you were raised in expectation of what work is supposed to mean. So you're not as emotionally attached to it. And what we see that, in generations like the boomer generation, they tend to be actually the least burned out. And what we see in this younger demographic, which you think, and unfortunately, it's been like kind of nicknamed the whiny millennial problem, is this burnout syndrome. And it's frustrating because when you think about it, these folks are coming out of college and university with major debt. They have not established their brand at all as the creative person or the hard worker person. And they're starting it now, particularly in a pandemic, without meeting their boss, without meeting their coworkers, working virtually, not establishing anything in their career. And then they have this indebted servitude because they have these golden handcuffs now of just having to afford their life and pay off debt. And then at the same time, they're in a state where they're mostly living in urban centers where there's single occupancy dwellings, they're living alone, and they're not meeting their potential spouse or their best friends. All of these things, they're so lonely. So you add all that up, and they're also just having to establish their brand by working extra hard and making less money. So no wonder they are burned out. I mean, it makes so much sense, but we tend to just think of it like, oh, they're just this woke generation that just wants to have their cake and eat it too and work less hours. And that's not actually the truth. They want to be in the office. They want to see people. They want to connect with people, develop those relationships, establish their careers, and they want to pay off this massive debt that they have owed back to the, university that they just attended.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. I'm just a talk show host here. But when you use the word agency, what does that mean?
It just means, choice of how you're working and the workload that you receive. So when you have a lack of agency, what it means is, say you're working in your, where your priorities and goals are supposed to be, and then your boss just dumps work on you at 11 o'clock at night and you have to have it done by the next morning. Or you have a client that says, oh, I need this urgently. And then you have to dump everything else and then do all that other work at home on weekends and in evenings. That's agency. Before, that lack of agency actually showed up in employers not allowing people to work remote or virtually or have flexibility in their hours. Well, we've swung that pendulum really far in one direction. But the employers now that are saying you hear these big CEOs saying, come back to work and I expect you to be in the office 9 to 5, or not 9 to 5, probably more like, 6 to 6. And I want you to move back to these, big centers that are not affordable. And people are just saying no. And the people that feel like that agency is taken away from them are quitting. Because that's just not how it's going to be anymore. It's just totally changed.
So one of these days, this generation, Gen Z, I guess, they're going to rebel, and not just walking away, but forcing change in how things are done collectively.
I hope so. I mean, the legacy of how it was in the previous generations hasn't really been working. It's actually failing. So I hope so. And I hope that they're establishing new companies that have different mindsets about how we should work. What is the real consequences of working 60, 70 hours a week, and then also then adding that to working at home after those hours of being in the office. I really do hope that we learn from this experience and not waste this crisis, because we have 2 years in a crisis and we just go back to the way things were. It just feels like there was nothing that we gained or learned from it. And so I'm hoping Gen Z's come in and establish new rules and say, you know what, if you're not going to do it and you're going to lose out on an awesome, high performing, young, excited person and passionate at work, I'm going to go start up my own company, which we're seeing a lot. And there's a lot of ability for people to do that from anywhere. And if, employers and leaders and organizations don't get on board with that, and they keep trying to jam the toothpaste back in the tube, then they're going to become obsolete. It's a taxi Uber moment right now. Do you want to be taxi or do you want to be Uber? So you can choose.
So we have, unfortunately, about 9 minutes remaining. So I'm going to let Steve take over here. But before we let you go, though, I'd like you to look inside your table of contents and tell us what your favorite chapter is, so we know what to look for.
That's a hard one, because I think it's really important to know what is burnout, root causes, and all that stuff. But one of my favorite chapters that I wrote was, two of them, but my favorite, maybe if I have to pick one, was, the chapter around developing curious cultures and just what it means to be curious and how important that is. And it seems like, that seems like such a trivial thing. But curiosity is really rooted in empathy and developing empathetic leadership. And it's also, what I love about that is in the military, guidebook to leadership, empathy, out of the 3 things that are the most important part of being a leader, empathy is second behind warrior ethos. Like it's not a soft skill. It's a really important skill. The reason why I think empathy is going to be the superpower of organizations, if they develop those skills in the future, is that you can start to get really good at actively listening and figuring out what's happening kind of in the gray area. And direct managers have this huge capacity to just, have these simple meetings where they're checking in and asking people, what is a high and a low of this week? And what can I do to make next week easier? I mean, it should be just micro changes over time and a lot of active listening and a lot of, quick wins and quick shifts and being, iterative and agile. And you only do that if you care and you're curious enough to want to know the answer and want to do something with the answer. True curiosity is wanting to take something and do something and make change out of it. And so that's what I think is so important, is how do you develop a culture of curiosity? It takes very specific strategic thinking, and the ones that do it really well. Like I interviewed the chief anthropologist for ADP, Dr. Martha Bird, which I love that there's a C-level anthropologist. But she says our job as direct managers is to be professional eavesdroppers. Like we're always supposed to be kind of like listening to what is the undertones and, what people are saying. Are people constantly talking about how difficult the challenge is to decide of putting their mom in assisted living, or that they're having a hard time affording their kids going to university? Like those are the kind of things we can listen to and create real dynamic motivators or burnout prevention strategies around those tiny little nuanced, perceptions that we're picking up. So I think that's maybe what it might be the most, kind of fascinating about the book, is these ways that we can integrate empathy to motivate and actually be much more competitive.
We are pleased to welcome Adamo Education as a proud sponsor of Global TV Talk Show.
The concept of a microschool is the reimagining of the one-room schoolhouse. My name is Tamara Becker. I'm the president and CEO of Adamo Education. The microschool concept really does not just lend itself to the personalization and the customization of learning, but also the social development and fostering that sense of love for learning. Unlike what we see in traditional brick and mortar schools, we have multiple grade levels in the same learning space. Students can be enriched by the socialization that they get, as well as the academic support from peers. What differentiates Adamo is the fact that we are taking the best pieces of brick and mortar, of digital, and then at-home learning. Students here can come 5 days a week. They can come 4 hours a day. It will really just depend on what is best for the student and for the parent. To enroll, just reach out via phone, text, or email, and we'll have that personalized conversation, and we'll be able to get you all set. Check us out at adamoeducation.org.
Hi, this is Ed, and I thank you for tuning in to Global TV Talk Show, a unit on globalbusinessnews.net. We broadcast to the world, as you know by now. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that our programs are advertising supported. We're grateful for co-sponsors, advertisers. They have a marketing budget coupled with a strong desire to be associated with our top quality program. And of course, I'm grateful. Thank you. So for the next few minutes, you're going to see some commercials. It's mostly very low key, and our prices are very, very reasonable. Our exposure for the advertisers go 12 months and beyond. Some of our advertisers have been with us since March, April of 2020. And Google Analytics has tracked over 125,000 what they call audience page views, which means you looking at this page, that's a page view. Now, if you happen to go to one of our other shows or to our radio broadcasts or to our newspaper or magazine, those become additional page views as measured by Google Analytics. And so when they say 125,000 since spring of 2020 up through Labor Day, a month ago, that's pretty good numbers. And the past 30 days, Google Analytics has measured just under 6,000 audience page views. And that, according to them, is a 42% increase in audience participation over the month of August. So thank you very much. Well, here's our advertisers, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes or so, and we'll proceed with this interesting conversation. Thank you.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we're researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what happened to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
I like the concept of micro steps, the little steps. So if you do them every week, then suddenly you've got 50 steps in a year. Thrive Global, I'll share one with you. Thrive Global, apparently when they have this is the company started by Ariana Huffington, when they have their all hands meeting every week, they always start it because part of their mission is to reduce stress in the world. Every week when they start their all hands meeting, they have one person speak to what are they personally doing in their life to cope with stress and manage stress. And they just give their own examples of that. So other than that, who else would you recommend? Who else could somebody benchmark or look to? Which organizations are getting it right or starting to get it right, do you think? Or is that too soon?
There are, and I did some great interviews. There's great research that I did with lots of different companies. Some of the really big companies are making sweeping changes that you would have never heard about before when it comes to bereavement leave and parental leave and some of those other things. But, the big companies, and ones that I interviewed for the book too, Hewlett Packard and Cisco and IBM. And, some of those they were already establishing a lot of flexibility. They were already establishing a lot of these prevention strategies that weren't just wellness perks long before the pandemic. So they fared a lot better. Their employees don't feel like it's a big all of a sudden massive disruptive shift in their life to have this flexible relationship with people. So those folks that have already sort of prepared for it are doing better. But we also see this with like smaller companies. This one company, Continuum, which I thought was a great story that I shared in the book. Well, she realized that her staff were really hit hard by the pandemic from a healthcare standpoint. And she also realized that a lot of them, because they were all call centers, about 60,000 staff were call center, in call center roles, and we're living kind of paycheck to paycheck. It wasn't high paying jobs. And they had a really big push to bring people in that were incarcerated or single moms. Like they had this effort to just try to give people a leg up. Well, they partnered with this one company called Branch, and it's a branch app, but it was a challenger bank that allows you to actually take your money anytime that you work. You can take 50% of your pay at any time in real time. So you work a day, you can take 50% of your pay, and then the rest of the paycheck is held back to get every 2 weeks. But she really felt like in the moment of having so much disparity and stress and worry about people living paycheck to paycheck and having to pay copays and extra health and costs because of COVID, she would make their pay accessible to them. And so this is like a really good example of just, this works for my company. This is the demographic of people that work for me. What is the thing that is their biggest pain point and causes them the biggest stressor? And how do I come up with a solution for that? And, I keep seeing that people just really listening, actively listening, realizing what is a big pain point and then fixing it. And that's why I think that empathy as a leadership skill is going to be really important. And of course, they just had a lot less turnover. People were really, their employee experience scores were really high. Their job satisfaction scores were really high in a company an industry where you see a lot of turnover. So they measured and proved that just by actively listening and making some adjustments that they would be able to retain their workforce.
Wonderful. I think companies are going to have to do this, or governments slowly will start intervening. I mean, in Australia, they've passed legislation now where companies can be held liable for work-related deaths because 2 lawyers died in 2 different bank merger situations. Okay, of course, France, I believe it is now, says you can't message or text your employees after business hours, and some people are starting to experiment with 4-day work weeks as well. So if organizations don't get their act together, I think governments are going to jump in. Obviously, you're agreeing. I see you smiling and nodding your head.
Yeah, the policy piece, and there's always this argument around how much government should intervene and how much they shouldn't. But I really do think when it comes to workplace safety rules, we've had tons of policies and laws around safety at work. Psychological safety is safety, and mental health is health. So if we're worried that someone's going to fall off a ladder, and there's policies, and laws around keeping it safe at work so people don't fall off ladders, why wouldn't you have the same thing for people, dying from overwork? 2.8 million people die from overwork per year. We have 8% of our US, healthcare outlays go to dealing with stress. I mean, it's a major problem. So if we're looking at psychological safety and catastrophic results from the lack of that kind of safety, we should be putting those policies in. Where I live too, we have a right to disconnect policy. And you're seeing that now. France really initiated, but you're seeing it all over the world. And I keep saying, to leaders when I have these conversations with them, why wait for an employee to sue you because there's a law? For you just have good human-centered leadership, let's just be good people and not email people at 11 o'clock at night. Let them take a vacation without worrying that they have to be working. Let them have their weekends. I mean, nothing is actually, if we work efficiently, we don't need to work in our evenings and weekends. It's just about you being better at creating the environment where people can work within, the time that they're at work.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think we ought to say, please come back and extend this conversation. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you both. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Stephen, and have a good day. We'll see you again.
Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.